Well, Governor Gavin Newsom just signed Senate Bill 2, limiting access to concealed carry permits in California. Here to talk about it is Executive Director of the San Diego County Gun Owners PAC, Michael Schwartz. Michael, good morning. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
For those who don't know, let's just talk about what SB2 is.
Sure. So SB2 does a number of things, but the big thing it does is it basically makes every area outside of your home, every business, every synagogue, every church, every park, public transportation, you name it, and it turns it into what's called a sensitive area, or an area where even somebody who's gone through the training, gone through the background check to get a carry permit so that they can defend themselves outside of the home and carry a firearm, even if they've gone through those steps and obtained the permit, they still can't carry there. So right now there are places that we all agree on that you can't carry, that nobody's really fighting back against, like airports and city hall and courtrooms and places like that. Well, this SB2, the governor, is turning the entire state into a sensitive area, to where essentially you won't be able to carry anywhere.
Do we know that for sure? They use the term sensitive areas. Have they designated by name specifically areas?
Oh yeah, very specific. Anything having to do with medical, public transportation, churches, synagogues, places where private places that are owned by individuals, not open, or not government owned, but if they have any kind of access to the public, like a grocery store, any kind of retail store, any kind of medical facility, any kind of public place like a library or a park or an amusement park. I mean, it's a really huge, extensive list. And if you put this into practical terms, if you really look at a map and see, okay, this is where I normally go over the course of a month, you essentially aren't able to go anywhere and still carry.
And last year, the Supreme Court handed down a decision that you don't have to have a reason to conceal carry. As an American citizen, you have the right. Would that supersede this law?
Well, so that's what was the catalyst, is that the Supreme Court said, hey, California, this subjective thing that you're doing where you're making people prove that they should be able to, carry, they still have to go through a background check. You still have to take the training. You still have to pay the fee, et cetera, et cetera. You still have to do all those objective things. But they had this subjective requirement that you have to write a paragraph explaining why or why not. And then it was up to a bureaucrat or the sheriff to decide if you got to exercise your right. So the court said you can't do that anymore, California, and California's response was, okay, fine, if we have to issue the permits according to the Supreme Court, then we're just gonna make it to where these permits are useless because you can't carry anywhere. So we filed a lawsuit based on the Supreme Court's decision because we feel like this is a direct violation of that.
Okay, let's talk about this because it doesn't get brought up nearly enough. Gun-free zones. Okay, I interviewed a couple weeks ago after that shooting that took place in 2 locations on the East Coast. I believe her title was President of the National Police Officers Association, and I asked her about that. I said, what about gun-free zones? And she went off. She said gun-free zones are the dumbest thing in the world because according to the numbers, don't like 90% of mass shootings happen in gun-free zones?
Actually, well over 90% of the mass shootings that people have read about in the papers or seen on TV have happened in a gun-free zone. Yeah, this is essentially going to turn the entire state of California into a gun-free zone. Law enforcement is completely and totally against it. It's preventing people from defending themselves when they're out in public, trained, sane, law-abiding people.
Sure.
And I think when people, think of this and say, oh, okay, well, maybe a stereotypical gun owner won't be able to carry, what's the big deal? But since California has had to issue, since the Supreme Court said, hey, you need to issue, we've seen, women that were victims of assault, and now they're able to defend themselves with a carry permit. We've seen religious leaders and all sorts of people who are now able to defend themselves and be secure outside of the home. So what this SB2 is going to do, and what the governor is doing in effect, is it's leaving people disarmed. It's making people who are at risk, they're going to be completely unable to defend themselves. I mean, this is really going to do a lot of damage, but that gun-free zone thing is exactly why. It's making everything in the state a gun-free zone, which will actually leave us worse off than we were, because now criminals see, hey, you know what? Nobody's armed, nobody's able to defend themselves.
Yep. Don't have to worry about anybody resisting. All right, Michael Schwartz, we'll see where this one goes.
Thank you.
Hopefully I'm sure we'll have you back soon.